What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And Lizard is a rat. This is not breaking news to anybody that's familiar with even a little bit of NF history, but Daniel Lizard Hernandez, if you don't know who he is, he was an NF member for a little bit, and then he paroled and started working with the feds and did a bunch of sanctioned criminal activity through them, and then did supposedly a bunch of unsanctioned criminal activity through them also. And it looked like he was wanting to build a Michael Thompson-like career, right? And if you don't know who Michael Thompson is, Aryan Brotherhood member for a while, and then he dropped out and worked with the feds and testified in kind of Congress like in the 80s or something. But then went around to Gangland and all these TV shows and has all these fantastic stories of, you know, the dozens of people he's taken out and knife fights and how, you know, they wanted to recruit him into the Black Panthers. Then he got in a knife fight with Yogi and just all kinds of crazy shit, right? Lizard seemed like he wanted to go down that path, and then supposedly he died. But there's been a lot of videos made about him. This article in its entirety has been read word for word multiple times on multiple channels. I'm not going to do that here, but through an odd twist of events that I won't even necessarily get into, I stumbled across this article, and in reading it, I was like, hold on, man, this just doesn't make any sense. And this seems to be the basis for a lot of videos about him. He was on Gangland talking about the NF, and they had him vaguely disguised. But even that, you know, was in large part, it seems, based on this article. And this article is not some piece of investigative journalism. It's a reporter with a local underground paper in the Bay Area who communicated with Lizard over a period of time through letters and some phone calls while he was in federal witness protection, waiting to testify in Operation Black Widow, right? Like 2001. And so I'm going to go through some key parts of this because in reading it, I had some questions. So I reached out to people, and I've done time with people that knew Lizard. I know where Lizard from in the streets. I know his family. I didn't make those connections when I first heard of the dude, right? Because he's not anybody that ever really was relevant to me, right? I was in the Corcoran Shoot program when Marceli Carlitos got the filter saying that, you know, Axilli had flipped, right? He was working with the feds. That's the last place that he had paroled from. Carlitos from San Jose did not hold Lizard in high regard and had just had an incident with him in Corcoran and had an incident with him, you know, years prior in San Quentin. And so I first heard about him then, but like I said, I'm going to get into some of the stuff in the article because a lot of what you heard about this dude, beside the fact that he's a rat, I don't think it's true, right? So like I said, I'm not going to read this whole article. I really want to kind of just get into his background and his story and call some of this stuff into question, right? It's a very long article. Based on the videos, it takes like 30 minutes to read. So it says, you know, there we go. Gang affiliation in California is often a matter of geography, but for Daniel Hernandez, it wasn't that simple. He was born in Pittsburgh, which made him a norteño by birth. Okay, that's not how that works. But 1 year later, his family moved to Long Beach, the heart of Sureño country. Again, slight exaggeration, but yes, Pittsburgh is in Northern California and Long Beach is in Southern California. And for Raza that gangbangs, you're more likely to be a Northerner in Pittsburgh and more likely to be a Southsider in Long Beach. Hernandez never belonged to either group until he ended up in prison. That is not true, but I'll show you why. His middle-class Long Beach upbringing, okay, we don't care about that shit. Then at 14, he began to glimpse a different world. He smoked pot, tasted alcohol. His teen angst surfaced one day when he threatened to kill his vice principal. After he was expelled, his parents sent him back north to live with an aunt in Pittsburgh, where he continued to carouse. That is where he picked up the nickname Lizard from friends who admired his clandestine nature. No, the dude was a snake. Like his clandestine nature. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? For going to Pittsburgh. So the Hernandez family is actually a big ass family in Pittsburgh, right? Some of them hang out around Parkside. VPC, Barrio Pitas, Califas, right? Barrio Pittsburgh, Califas, Northerners, Northerners. So if he's pulling up in Pittsburgh at 14, right? And there's some question about how old he is, because I swear the dude ain't more than maybe 6 years older than me, but absolutely 10 years at the absolute most. But most people who know him don't think that he was that old, right? But so anyways, him pulling up in Pittsburgh, I'm familiar with Pittsburgh. That's where I caught my case. I lived out in Contra Costa County for like 3 years before going to prison. And there's no way in hell this dude pulls up in Pittsburgh with a whole family of Northerners out there, everybody gangbanging, no Southsiders in Pittsburgh whatsoever at the time, and he just floats around as a Southsider. That didn't happen, okay? He kicked it with the North, right? And that's relevant because of what he's going to get into in a minute. He had some kind of tattoo, like behind his ear or something, L.A. or Long Beach or something like that. And he got teased about it, but he was not a Southsider. Nobody viewed him as a Southsider because the narrative that was built around him is he was a Southsider who then became an NF member. He was never a Southsider, right? And his story in prison is weird too. So listen to this. When he first went to prison, he was 19. While awaiting sentencing for armed robbery, he said he knifed a member of the Aryan Brotherhood in self-defense. So that don't really sit right. Because Pittsburgh is in Contra Costa County. The odds that he encounters an Aryan Brotherhood member from Contra Costa County, in the Contra Costa County jails, is pretty slim, right? There's one name that kind of comes to mind, but he didn't stab that dude. So I don't think that happened, right? I don't think that ever happened. And then but that's when he started his career as a writer. And then he was transferred to Chino, right? So you would not go to Chino Reception Center from Contra Costa County. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if he was down south and he got busted down south, maybe he went back to visit in Long Beach because the article's not clear. But if he went down there and went to the county jail and stabbed an AB member, he'd have been washed, right? Because the AB and the MA, the whole Southsiders whites, alignment thing gets exaggerated sometimes or kind of misinterpreted. But there is no mistaking that the Mexican Mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood had a close relationship. And that Southsiders will do what the Mexican Mafia tells them to do. So, again, if you're slightly familiar with how prison works, there ain't no way in hell that you blast the AB member in a county jail in Southern California, self-defense or otherwise, and then just go be a Southsider in prison, which is what he suggests that he did. And again, you probably ain't blasting an AB member in the county jail up in Contra Costa either. But if you are in Contra Costa County Jail, how do you end up in Chino for reception center? So he goes down there and he sells up with 2 Texas gang members who had been banished for terrorizing their own prison system. It's not quite how it works, right? TS, I think he's talking about TS. And it seems like he's wanting to check all the boxes in this early part of his story, right? He's wanting to show how he's familiar with the Aryan Brotherhood, familiar with the Texas Syndicate, familiar with the Mexican Mafia, familiar with the NF, familiar with the BGF, right? They come up as a cameo in his story in a minute. So the 2 people banished from Texas, again, that's not really how it works. But TS was a factor in the California prison system at one time, and maybe he was celled up with them. I seem to think that whole prison term is just made up, personally. I think it's all bullshit. So they taught him how to, melt shampoo bottles into Sanks. Boy, if you're stabbing with people with shampoo bottles in the 80s, you got a problem. Because the weapon stock in the California Department of Corrections in the 80s was a lot better. Like when I came into prison in the 90s, right, in 96, we learned how to melt down shampoo bottles and that kind of stuff. And I'm sure that people were doing it back then. They were making weapons out of everything. But fuck, you still had zip guns in prison in the 80s, But anyways, so it sounds good. The whole National Geographic thing, right? That's classic. And then in November 86, he tried out these new skills on another inmate and was transferred to San Quentin. So he stabs an Aryan Brotherhood member. He gets set up with a Texas Syndicate. He randomly stabs some dude in Chino. And now he's in San Quentin in 86. Up to that point, Lizard had identified himself as a Sureño. This is why I mentioned the whole Southsider thing. he had identified himself as a Sureño, but only when pressed, right? Because there was plenty of raza running around that was just kind of like, I'm sort of independent, but I'll kind of be a Southsider. So that's not how it works, right? This is not how it fucking works. And again, if he was identifying as a Southsider, the fact that he stabbed the Aryan Brotherhood member, if that was true, he'd have been through. There's no way. You're not going to last. So he shows up at San Quentin, and then one day on the yard, he's approached by Juan Nato Gurul, a long-lost cousin from the East Bay. First of all, he lived with his aunt in Pittsburgh. How long-lost is the fucking cousin, right? And I know who Nato is, right? So Nato had worked his way up the ranks from Norteño street thug to membership in the Nuestra Familia prison gang. Okay, that's not true. To the best of my knowledge and everybody that I've talked to, Nato was never a C. He was never an NF member. Cool dude, down with the business, absolutely. But not a C, you know, and he's still out there. He's still out in Pittsburgh, in that area. His grandson, I think it is, actually just got killed a few years back. Really sad situation at Deer Valley High in Antioch, just after a basketball game or something. Something happened in the parking lot, and he got killed. But so no, that again, and that's what makes me say I think this dude's full of shit. He's just putting a 10 on 2. So Lizard recalls Nato asking him why he claimed Sureño and if he'd heard the history of the gang conflict. Lizard hadn't, so Nato schooled him on the long-standing war. So again, he comes from a family in Pittsburgh that had been back and forth to jail, that knew about the North-South stuff. He was not ignorant to that stuff. He kicked it tough with his family. He was over on Parkside all the time as a kid. And he wasn't as old as these articles make him seem to be. But so none of that. He did not just learn of that in prison. He did not go to prison and identify one fucking day as a Southsider. Nato was not an NF member. Shit just didn't happen, right? He wasn't stabbing all these people. So this just goes on to talk about how the divisions and gang boundaries and, 1965 and right? I don't care about that stuff. And the race riots, racial gangs. In the 70s, they started separating them. Lizard recalls what Nato told him that day in San Quentin. And mind you, San Quentin in 86, 87 was a violent ass prison, right? I've heard some videos, some conversations that people who were around Quentin in that era, it was bloody between North and South, NF, Mexican Mafia. Like it was, the 80s was a rough time, and the idea that you're going to switch up is in that environment and that you're going to survive. No. So Lizard recalls what Nato told him on that day back in San Quentin. Primo, if the North and South go to war, I can't protect you just because you're my blood. If you wish to change your alliance, you will still have to prove to Norteños you are worthy, and the Sureños will want to kill you for switching sides. Almost 2 decades later, Lizard still recalls the clarity of that moment. The thought of slashing his cousin made no sense. He claimed Norteño. For the next 3 months, he made his bones among Norteños by slashing Sureño inmates, brothers he'd once shouldered with. Again, if you understand or if you have any familiarity with how prison worked in California in the 80s, that shit wasn't happening, right? No. So there were sleepers, don't get me wrong. There were sleepers, there were incognito people, that kind of stuff. But this idea that you're just like, oh, now I'm a Norteño, let me sneak around and blast all these Southsiders and ain't nobody going to do nothing about it is ridiculous. And there's more. There's a lot more to his bullshit story. So, like a religious convert eager to please his superiors, his first efforts impressed his would-be peers. Not only was there one less Sureño, but Lizard also showed a knack for attacking without detection. He could shank and roll, as the prisoners say. Show me the prisoners. Show me the prisoners who say shank and roll. Stick and move, maybe, right? It's actually a boxing term, but it also applies to stabbing people. But shank and roll? Let me know in the comments, man. I didn't have a choice, he recalled. The system certainly creates you. Right. Lizard and Nato were both soon paroled. They moved together in the Pittsburgh apartment. Nato continued his cousin's indoctrination into the NF. He was not getting indoctrinated into the NF on the streets. Again, Nato, I think, Nato's politicking. He was educated. But again, I don't hear anything about him being an NF member. And he wound up being deemed for whatever reasons also. So Nato goes and Lizard moves away, and then he comes back, and he winds up in this incident in 94, right, in Pittsburgh. Faced 25 years. What the law didn't know is Lizard had an escape plan, and he had influence on the streets. He wrote to a member of the Black Guerrillas whom he'd met in San Quentin. After the gang member sent word to his people on the street, the witnesses to Lizard's crime were persuaded not to show up for trial. So why do you have to send word to the BGF? There has been a BGF presence at times in that area, so I'm not saying that's impossible, especially in 94. But why you gotta send word to the BGF when you got big-ass family and all these homeboys in Pittsburgh? Like, they wasn't gonna do it? Again, I think it's just his desire to kind of bring in every notable organization and gang into his story. So the DA was forced to offer Lizard a 6-year deal, which he happily accepted. Returned to San Quentin in June of 94 to begin his sentence. Eager to shore up his status in the NF, he soon stabbed Sureño Rodolfo Castillo in the throat, nearly killing him. Now, I'm not sure where he would have encountered this Sureño in San Quentin in 1994, because they didn't have Southsiders in San Quentin in 1994. So I don't know where he found him, right? He also followed protocol and reported to the prison's ranking gang member, Daniel Wino Perez. Norteños who enter a new prison are required to reveal their status to their superiors, either verbally or in writing. But Wino rejected Lizard. He told the young man if he wanted to be recognized by NF, he could appeal to the generals. So here's where things get odd, right? One of many places. But so Carlitos, Marcelli in Corcoran, right, had told me that when Lizard first came through San Quentin, he was claiming to have status, right? He was in the hole in San Quentin, and he was claiming to have status. And yes, Wino, Carlitos, others were like, fool, you don't got no status. And the dude that schooled you is a piece of shit, right? According to the politics. I'm not saying on a personal level, but, who schooled you? And he named some people, and it's like, bro, those people ain't even good. So no, you don't have no status, right? That's ridiculous. And so that's how that went, right? He was a northerner in San Quentin in 1994, right? In Adzeg, a run-of-the-mill dude, just like everybody else. But it's a time where you had hella NF members there. So then Lizard got lucky. A general named Big Smiley Ramirez was transferred from Pelican Bay to the cell directly below his own. Oh, it's interesting. So Smiley, right, who's the general, he did get transferred to San Quentin for surgery, right? He had like eye surgery or ear surgery, some shit. He had went down there for surgery from the Bay. He was validated. They make it seem like they put Smiley with Lizard, but that Lizard was in the general population. And that just doesn't make any sense. San Quentin is not going to put somebody like Big Smiley in the GP. He went to the hole, right? He went to the hole and he awaited his surgery and transferred back to the Bay. So Lizard wrote Big Smiley a wheeler, stuck it on a gum wrapper. Then Smiley sends Lizard his own wheelers and books on Chicano history. Weeks later, the general was attacked by Sureños and landed in solitary confinement. Ain't no Sureños blasted Smiley in San Quentin, right? I know several people who were in San Quentin at that time. Plus, common sense would tell you that if there was an NF general that was blasted in the 90s by the Southsiders, the first place you heard about it would not be fucking Lizard's, little love letters to this reporter. He didn't get stabbed by no Southsiders. There was no Southsiders. Nobody was going to be able to get that close to him. He had already been in solitary confinement. He was never not in solitary confinement. So Lizard said during that time, he heard two Norteños disrespecting Smiley's name and took the initiative to stab them both. Again, that's not how being a Norteño works. You don't take the initiative to stab other. You know what, teacher? I'm going to be all I can be. I'm just going to go out in the yard and blast these fools because I heard them talking shit. And I think, no, who the fuck are you? No, that doesn't happen. If that does happen, your career is over, whether your move is justified or not. Like, this dude's talking like he was some high-ranking NF member at the time, and he wasn't. He was a fucking Northerner. That shit never happened to Smiley. And even if it did, he ain't gonna run around and blast Northerners for talking shit. Like, this is all from thin air, right? All from thin air. Lizard and he got away with it. And when Big Smiley emerged, I don't know, maybe from the hospital, from that vicious stabbing, I don't know. Then he sponsored Lizard into the NF. That didn't happen either, right? Lizard wound up getting into the NF. Yes, he got his status stamped by Quentin later. But so no, this, again, I think all these stabbings are bullshit. It's all nonsense. Lizard was then ordered to make a move on Jeremiah Ruiz, a NF dropout. Lizard said he beat Ruiz to a pulp with his fist, bringing his victim close to death. Now that quite possibly could have happened out on the 6-yard, right? Like, Cass was getting hands put on him, so maybe he did beat somebody up because he was ordered to. That's one thing that could actually be true. For this outburst, prison administrators shipped Lizard off to Pelican Bay. The last stop, right? He did wind up going to the Bay. California's most feared prison. Okay, we don't hear all that shit. Not at all coincidentally, Pelican Bay had also become the headquarters of the NF. Pelican Bay was the headquarters of every prison organization because all the leaders were validated and housed there. Including the gang's top 3 generals. In 2000, a yard riot launched by gang members ended after 250 inmates were injured. Many of them were stab wounds. That has nothing to do with anything having to do with Lizard, right? That's just not relevant. When Lizard arrived in January 95, right, that was a whole lot of stabbing that he did to go from being in the county jail in 94 to going through San Quentin, stabbing and beating up and stabbing and getting recruited into the NF. And then he's in Pelican Bay on the main line by January 95. He checked in with the ranking gang member to test his allegiance. He was ordered to move on his cellmate, Johnny Widow Thief Hernandez. Little said he attacked him as he slept, pummeling him into a bloody mess until the guards pulled him up. Again, that may be true because, again, some people were getting, Northerners wound up doing away with hands-on discipline, right? At some point, it was like you can't just, beat up people and they're cool. Now, you could beat them up, smash them off the yard, and they may be able to clear up whatever issues they had. But from the moment that you smash them off the yard, they are removed. And then if they find their way back in, then that's their own business. But it wasn't like you're smashed off the yard and then you can just go to the hole and go out to the yard in the hole and the homeboys ain't gonna touch you. But it wasn't always like that. There was a time where you get your ass whooped. When I was in San Quentin, the homie had fucking beaters put on him. But it was just a discipline. And he got lumped up in a cell and was told, hey, we'll bring you your food until you heal up, but don't do that again. So that could be, right? So far we got 2 fist fights that are reasonable. So anyways, he was sentenced to 6 months in the SHU, where more than 1,000 inmates spend 23 hours a day. A 6-month SHU for beating up your cellie is pretty extreme, but so punishing daily regimen of crunches and push-ups followed by makeshift weightlifting with a barbell from pillowcases. You're expected to smuggle in a copy of the NF Constitution inside your legal folders and commit the document in its philosophy to memory. Boy, you get caught with the Constitution in your legal work, you're in trouble. And you had to learn sign language. And you had to write essays. This was our college. There's some truth to all that stuff, right? Of course. I wanted to be that NF member that people could count on. And in every fashion, when necessity called for it, I was with it. So he's released from the SHU in August of 95, chiseled and fit as a warrior in heart and mind. I was ready to go. Big Smiley immediately ordered his soldier to enforce gang laws back in C facility. He swung his weight around hard. At night, he ordered rows of NF inmates to recite loud Aztec war chants to rattle guards and enemies. That doesn't happen either. You know how obnoxious that is? No. Hey guys, let's just piss off the COs and yell out of our doors at night. Man, that's some JCat SOI shit. No, that's not how it works. And so that autumn, according to testimony from a fellow gang member, Lizard ordered 17 stabbings. So he proved he had the muscle to ascend within the NF. Now he had to prove he had the mind to match. Back in the GP, he reported to his ranking captain, Quentin Rubalcaba. So Quentin was not in the GP. Quentin was in the SHU, right? He wasn't on the yard in Pelican Bay. But if you're kind of familiar with this era, there's this little thing called the D facility dilemma. And who was at the center of the D facility dilemma? Part of that had to do with Smiley, right? Smiley, Pantera, all this other stuff. Where did Quentin come down on that, right? So you can see some of the pieces here. And yes, at some point, then Lizard winds up in the SHU, celled up with Quentin. Quentin makes him a C. That's where he gets his status from. So that is the start of his NF career, not all this other bullshit, right? And so Quentin took a sign to Lizard because Lizard was a stickler for detail. Blah, blah, blah. Quentin could trust him, but trust and Quentin in the same sentence doesn't really hold up well to the test of time. But yeah, he was celled up with Quentin. He did come up with the whole banks in Iowa or Idaho or whatever. And he was Quentin's dude, right? And again, that's where he became an NF member, right? So they talk about the different tricks and he's showing off all the shit you learn in prison and, you know, legal mail and all this other stuff, right? And so we're going to skip past this. So over the next 4 years, Lizard and Quentin masterminded and penned more than 3,000 letters, right? According to an FBI report. I mean, you do write a lot of letters in there at the time. And so Quentin and Lizard proved just how far their reach extended in early 99 when Brown Bob was killed. So I'd never heard from anybody that Lizard had a damn thing to do with Brown Bob being killed. Quentin, yes, different individual. There was a lot of politics at play, but I don't see Lizard being a relevant voice in that conversation whatsoever. A big moment in NF history, but that shit ain't got nothing to do with Lizard, right? Okay, he sent out a letter, right? Sent a letter to Chuco, sir, because you're a secretary. That's your job, right? So now, by the time he exits Pelican Bay, prison guards had nicknamed the NF the Blooming Flower for its astonishing growth. That's not true. The Blooming Flower, true, is a thing, but this is not, no. That's not accurate. Where do they get? I mean, motherfuckers just say anything. So he's paroled to the outside world May 18th of 2000, right? Even though he participated in many stabbings and beatings in prison, he'd avoided detection for most of his crimes, right? Because I'm a chameleon. No. So when he came back through Corcoran, right, to parole, he came back through Corcoran. When he pulls up there, and this is right before I get there, right? So this is all fresh stuff, you know, pretty soon before I get there. So Sombra, right, who is an NF member, tells Lizard when he pulls up, hey, you know, suit your shit, you know, your paperwork, the normal stuff, right? Like, here's the normal routine when you pull up to a new household. And he said no. He was like, nah, I ain't doing that. I'm here to serve as an advisor. I'm going to be an advisor when my time here. He advised these, you know. So that's what he said. And then he went out to yard. And Marcelli, who I wasn't there at the time, but Carlitos gets at him and tells him, bro, who the fuck are you? And this is Carlitos' words, right? Verbatim. Told Lizard, how dare you speak to Sombra that way? He has sacrificed for the cause. You haven't so much as slapped a bitch for the NF. Bro, who the fuck are you? And and he had told Sombra through a kite before that, before he had a chance to verbally communicate with Lizard, when Sombra was like, hey, fool, Lizard's here, and he's being kind of resistant to the program. Carlitos don't take him off roll call. Don't acknowledge him. Don't answer him. Fuck him then. And was really ready to just deem the dude. Like, you want to act like that? That's fine. Your career's over. Because he was a big dude and he liked to bully people, and Carlitos was kind of the anti-bully, right? And just never respected him. And also felt like it was a disgrace because in San Quentin, when Lizard, back then in the hole, right? When Lizard said he was an NF member, he was told, no, you are not, and keep that shit out your mouth. He wasn't told, go take it up with the generals. He was told, no, you're not, and keep that shit out your mouth. And he kept it out of his mouth. And so there's multiple NF members who are aware of that, who have later said, bro, if I really was a C and I believed I was an NF member, that's a lifetime commitment. You're not going to tell me to keep it out my mouth. We're going to have a problem then, right? Because I have made the ultimate commitment. And to have somebody tell you, bro, don't ever speak on that again, and then to do it demonstrates a level of cowardice and demonstrates a lack of commitment to this thing that you're claiming to be a part of and that some people really are a part of, right? So he had no respect coming from a lot of people even for that. He wiggled in. He's a snake. That's why they call him Lizard. He's a snake, not a chameleon. But so, anyways, man, this video's been 30 minutes. I'm gonna let it go. But he goes on here to, talk about how his time and how he how he became a rat, right? How he got out and then just started cooperating with the feds. So this whole legacy, the article says, his TV shows about him, all that other stuff is hogwash. I don't believe that dude ever stabbed anybody in prison. I don't think he ever picked up a knife against anybody. I think he put hands on a couple people and he's a big old boy. But I don't believe one piece of any of the other stuff. And it's not just me. I have not spoken to anybody who knows him who believes any of that to be true. Now, in the streets, yes, he was a bully. He had dope fiend tendencies, and he was aggressive, and he would press up on people. So he was a factor in the streets. But in prison, he always wanted to be that guy. But he never really did anything to be that guy. He wasn't that guy material in the eyes of many. The one who felt different was Quentin, which, again, is not shocking, right? Given the politics of the time and navigating and kind of building your own little teams and all the other weird shit that was going on. So yeah, there you go, man. You guys let me know what you think, but I really believe this is a strong candidate for the Michael Thompson of the NF. Help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. And stay tuned, man. We got more content dropping. I appreciate you.